name is Krista Pischner-Coon, and I am a teaching artist with Artists Creating Together. For today's Stay at Home, Stay Creative video, I am going to be walking you through a resist painting. And because Valentine's Day is just a couple days away, I thought it would be fun for it to be Valentine's Day or love themed. A resist painting is an art technique that uses several layers to expose or define a design in negative space. So using things like clear tape or a similar item to cover portions of the surface and with a resist layer, shaping some invisible designs, patterns, or other things. So my example is here. So I used tape to write the words love, and then I used an acrylic paint to paint the background, and then use some paint to splatter different colors. So with mine, I chose to use just 4 different colors. I used light pink, a red, turquoise, and purple. And I challenge you to also do the same, to only focus on 4 different colors. So you don't have to do one that says a word. You could also just do an abstract design, just straight lines, or you could also curve the tape to make circles or other different shapes. So this is another example. Materials you will need for the resist painting are a blank piece of paper, preferably white. I'm using watercolor paper, but any type of paper should be fine. You will also need masking tape, maybe a thinner one than what I have, but this is what I have at my house, or any other kind of tape similar to masking tape, like a painter's tape or something like that. You will also need paint. So I use an acrylic paint, Craft Smart brand, and I usually get this at a craft store like Michael's. But you don't have to use paint. If you are not using paint, you could use crayons, colored pencils, or markers. If you are using paint, you might want a paper plate or a paint palette to hold your paint. So I use a little paint palette. And then you'll want a jar or a container to hold clean water in, and then a paintbrush or a few paintbrushes. And then you also might like some paper towel. I like to use paper towel as I'm painting, just to kind of clean my brush off a little bit more, but also to clean up any messes. And then if you would like, you could also have a pencil or a ruler handy to help design your painting prior to actually putting paint on paper or color of different medium on paper. The first thing you'll want to do is tape your piece of paper to a surface. For my painting, I taped it to a large clipboard, but you could also just tape it to the surface of a table or a desk that you're using. I just didn't want to pull up the paint that's on my desk, so I decided to use the clipboard. Next, you will want to spell out the word love if you are choosing to do a resist painting with a word such as love themed around Valentine's Day. I just kind of guessed sizes for the different parts of the letter. I didn't do any measuring or anything like that. So you can do it that way, or you could measure and make it absolutely perfect. It is totally up to you. Next, I put paints in my paint palette, and I am mixing water into the light pink color over in one of the empty parts of the palette, and that's just to water down the paint a little bit. Otherwise, it's a little bit thick. Acrylic paint is usually pretty thin, but I'm just making it thinner, just so I can spread it out more on the paper. Then you paint your background. So I'm just painting my background with pink, just this light pink. You can use other colors too. You can mix colors. You can have the background be a variety of colors. For now, I'm just going to do a simple light pink. Feel free to be loose with your painting. You can paint over top of the tape, because underneath will stay perfectly clean and dry and clear of paint because the tape is covering it. Once your background is entirely covered in paint, I would let it dry for a few minutes. If you're working on the project quickly, you could use a hairdryer to dry it. Otherwise, just letting it air dry should be totally fine. I will let mine air dry. Once the background is pretty much dry, it's okay if it's a little bit wet, you can start to gather some paint on your paintbrush. Make sure it's nice and thick to bring over to the painting and splatter. You can just let it drip. You can really splatter it. Be careful, it might go on your walls or on the surface that you're painting on. So if you're painting in kind of a clean area, just be careful with the splattering if you're choosing to splatter. If you can't be a little messy where you are creating, maybe do not splatter. And I'm just using all of my colors here. I'm kind of switching back and forth. You can clean your brush in between the colors if you would like. You might want to add a little bit of water to the colors. Some of my paints are a little bit thicker than others. So I'm using a little bit of water just to loosen it up, but I'm still kind of gathering quite a bit of paint at the end of my paintbrush in order to really make some splatters. And you can hold your paintbrush far above the paint or the paper, or you can hold it closer to. For bigger globs, closer to. Once you really like how your painting looks, you can call it finished. I would let it dry for a few minutes. Again, if you want it to dry pretty quickly, you could use a hairdryer, or you could just let it air dry. If you have bigger globs of paint like I do up towards the top of my painting, like these and this one, you might want to let it dry for a little while before you peel the tape up. To peel the tape, I would be really careful with peeling. You can start with the outside, or you can start with the letters, whichever you choose. If you do peel with the paint a little bit wet, like I'm going to do, just be careful. Your hands will get a little bit full of paint, but that's okay. Just peel very carefully. And as you see it peel, you'll see that those paint splatters that were on the tape, they don't show up because the tape was covering the paper there. Here is the finished result with all of the tape off. You can see the word love, and I especially love how the splatter paint kind of hides behind the letters. You might like that too if you chose to use a splatter paint method like I did. Thanks so much for joining in on this activity. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you do something with your Valentine's Day or love themed painting or drawing. Whatever you chose to do. It's a great way to share a little message with a friend around this time of year, or if you want to give it to your parent or a guardian, or in my case, I am going to write a little message on the back of it for my husband. You can also, before you start to do the painting, you could always fold your piece of paper in half so that it's like a greeting card. That's an idea that might be kind of fun to explore. Then you could pop it in the mail and send it to somebody that lives far from you. I hope you enjoy.